Hey everybody, Jamie Starr here for the New World News Network. I just wanted to give a sort of quick take on the vice presidential debate last night. And, I'm just sort of like, I don't know, very discouraged. And I honestly, I'm at a loss for words because I don't know the word that would just most accurately describe my displeasure with the whole thing, because I really feel like between the first presidential debate and this one, so much of it is concerning fiction, like non-reality. Barely any of this debate is grounded in any sort of reality. I mean, occasionally there's a flurry of it here and there. Like, here's a question I frequently ask myself. If not for coronavirus, what would they be talking about? Because that's the big, coronavirus. I mean, come on, like, there was some question Kamala Harris was asked, and I can't remember what it was at this point. It might have had to do with trade or something that I feel like had a reality basis to it, and then she segues back to coronavirus. If there was no coronavirus, what would they be talking about? And it's very interesting because, like, the one thing I do find a great amount of pleasure in this whole charade about is it really illustrates how little people do need government, and beyond that, how little there's a need for it when everything is going good. And that's their biggest problem, is everything was going really good until coronavirus. So I mean, it's just so god, I'm so it's like a godsend to these Democrats. And then the other thing is, it's like, so coronavirus, they'll mention it, but there's very little mention of the reality of the situation. Medical experts came out and said their whole glass divider thing was symbolic. It doesn't play an actual role in anything as far as preventing it. Kamala Harris said young people will be affected. They're not. I mean, and even the journalists nowadays are taught, you had this whole thing about Trump standing on the balcony and trying to make that into some sort of Mussolini moment. And the subtext of what they're saying is, like, really, he should be sicker. He should still be in the hospital. He should be dying. And they don't like that through his actions, Trump is showing you the coronavirus is nothing. So there's that non-reality. Then there's the non-reality of white supremacy. What the non-reality of climate change, because now all of a sudden we're convinced that government policy creates wildfires and hurricanes. In some ways it exacerbates it, but I'd really like someone to explain to me how climate change starts forest fires. I mean, it's non-reality the whole way through. There was a very interesting remark that I caught Kamala Harris making, and again, I know she's playing to a demographic that doesn't have the attention span capable of picking up on these things, but in one breath she said that our allies have a higher view of Xi Jinping in China, when she was talking about us and the trade war with China and everything like that. So she says our allies have a higher respect of Xi Jinping in China. And then in the next breath, she says Donald Trump is cozying up to dictators like Vladimir Putin and losing the respect of our allies and our friends and all of this stuff. Now, I just wonder, is that the same allies and friends that you just explained had a higher view of a dictator than Donald Trump? Because even if you were to then follow that logic, where, I mean, there really isn't any, but just as a thought experiment, so if our allies are looking to the dictator in China and are cooler with him than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is cozying up to dictators, is he then not doing the same thing as our allies? Would our allies then not respect him because he's cozying up to dictators like the ones they're cozying up to. Like, it's just throwing shit at the wall and hoping something sticks. That's all that's really going on. But I was just really amazed because Kamala Harris was asked so many straightforward questions, and I mean, it was just, I was born somewhere, and my mama, and when I was a prosecutor, and I mean, I really hope people are going back into the archive of the Democratic debate when Tulsi Gabbard really ripped into Kamala Harris. I thought she would have known better by now than to bring up her record as a prosecutor. You know, Tim Dillon would make this joke that Kamala Harris was going to Yas Queen her way into the office and then just lock everyone up. And somehow it seems like that's what she's campaigning on. Like, these Democrats, either there is such little accountability for them, or they have such little self-awareness that they pretty much openly campaign on locking people up, oppressive government policies, war. Hillary Clinton campaigned on war, helping despots. I mean, Kamala Harris managed to go on a whole spiel about how we should be buddy with Iran, and I believe Iran is buddy with China. So again, there's this weird sort of non-reality thing going on where it's like Donald Trump is cozying up to, I mean, in best case scenario, what they're saying is Donald Trump is cozying up to the other dictators and not our dictators. So I don't know. I understand why election turnouts are so low. And it's just a really sad situation because you have this party that, you know, the packing the court thing is a great example. They are hell-bent on revolution and dismantling the system. And I don't think the average American who is trying to watch this thing and saying, this has nothing to do with me, I don't think that they understand the severity of what's going on. And I mean, people got a taste of that with Obama because they went to sleep, and this is very much an Obama tactic where none of the rhetoric is grounded in anything. And then they're actually doing things that severely hurt America, sell out our jobs to China, you know, enforce crazy amounts of regulation so only the millionaire and billionaire class can operate. That's one of the things that I think is very much downplayed by, or not downplayed, but understated when it comes to regulations, is when you have all of these regulations in place, the idea of starting a business or being an entrepreneur becomes daunting because you need, you know, the building inspectors and the regulators and, you know, lawyers for this and accountants for that. And the average American who just has an amazing world-changing idea feels as if the hoops they have to jump through to bring that idea to market are too much. Like, the upfront cost will be too much. It's very much like how Obama, when GE was his biggest campaign contributor, they started to set environmental regulations where they could pay for these, you know, carbon taxes, environmental credits, and all this other stuff. And it's also the same thing these big banks do, where these big banks will engage in illegal activities and set the rules, and then they can afford to pay the fines and break the rules, but the rules keep competition from coming into the picture. So, you know, it's also an interesting thing how I remember Kamala Harris making remarks about how Donald Trump only cares how rich people are doing. He doesn't care how the average American is doing. And I really hope that in the next presidential debate that they start talking about where Joe Biden's funding is coming from. And you know, I also saw a clip last night of a bunch of Democrats naked, you know, doing some sort of naked ballot, mail-in ballot sort of infomercial thing, but they're all nude. And, you know, the title on the video is basically, Democrats are doing porn now to encourage you to vote. And it really speaks to who they think their base is. And, like, when I have family members, like my mother in particular, and I look at her and I just think, why, what does this party offer you? They're the party of vote because of boobs, basically, burn down the cities, defund the police. Like, what is this offering you? And then when I try to, I accuse her and others like her of being a partisan, where I'm like, oh, there's nothing they're offering you. You just vote Democrat because you've voted Democrat forever and you're stuck in your ways and refuse to change. And then they get really angry. They get really, really angry because you've just basically called them on saying, oh, well, you've just chosen a team decades ago and you don't want your team to lose. And it really doesn't even matter what they say or do. That's your team. Because you're just basically calling them on being a partisan and being completely ignorant of the reality of the situation. But I don't know. I mean, it's a fucking, like I was saying, who they're appealing to. I really hope the Trump, in his next debate, they talk about Joe Biden's, his heavy donations from Wall Street, the celebrity class. The millionaires and billionaires are all on the Democrat side. So why they let this talking point even start to come out of the opposition's mouths, that as if they are the party of the 1% when they're not. I mean, you even see this in polling where Trump support is surging with working class blacks and Latinos, and yet the only people who are voting Democrat are college-educated white people. And again, the Democrats put out this false reality of diversion, inclusion, we're for this group and that group and the next group, and yet their donations don't match it, their polling doesn't match it, the voting doesn't match it. None of this is taking place in reality. That's what you really need to be aware of. And that's the scariest part of it, is nothing in these debates, none of the topics, nothing is in reality anymore.